So what would you do if you came home from a work trip, excited to tell your husband you were keeping the baby, and by the next morning, he had already decided you weren't going to see that baby born at all? I want you to answer that question by the time we get to the end of this story. But before that, if you're a fan of that kind of mysterious stories, then subscribe to this channel and join the family. And don't worry, we have a special room available for you. Do well to offer the like button a dark paint and come back to visit your room every Wednesday and Saturday for more stories. So without wasting time, let's dive into today's story. So I want us to pick this from what the family looked like. Shanann Watts was the kind of person who never really blended into a room. She was loud in the best way, a type of woman who showed up to a barbecue and somehow knew everyone's name by the end of it. She grew up in North Carolina, in a town called Aberdeen, and she carried that warmth with her everywhere she went, including onto social media where she posted constantly about her kids, her marriage, her work, basically her whole life laid out for anyone who wanted to follow along. Chris Watts was almost the opposite, quiet and steady, the kind of guy people describe afterwards as someone who just sort of faded into the background, easy to overlook, easy to trust, precisely because he never gave anyone a reason not to. They met online back in 2010, started talking, and within a couple of years they were married. By 2018, they had built what looked like a genuine happy life from the outside. They live in a big 5-bedroom house in Frederick, Colorado, a quiet suburb about half an hour north of Denver. Chris worked as an operator for an oil company called Anadarko Petroleum. Shanann sold health products for a multi-level marketing company called Livell. And honestly, she was very good at it, posting endless updates about her business, her workouts, her two little girls. They had Bella, who was 4, and Celeste, everyone called her CC, who was 3. And that summer, Shanann had already found out she was pregnant again. A boy this time, they had already picked the name, Nico. If you scroll through Shannon's Facebook page that summer, you'd see exactly what you'd expect from a family doing well. Smiling photos at the pool, videos of the girl laughing in the backyard, a pregnant mom glowing about a new baby on the way. What you wouldn't see, because nobody ever really sees this part until it is too late, was what was actually happening in that home underneath all of it. Money had been tight for the Watts family for a while. Back in 2015, they had filed for bankruptcy, with debts adding up to nearly $450,000 against the combined income of around $100,000. That is the kind of financial pressure that sits on a marriage quietly for years, the kind that doesn't show up in a Facebook post, but slowly wears at everything underneath the surface. And there was something else, something Shanna didn't know yet, or maybe she suspected and just couldn't say it out loud. Chris had started having an affair with a co-worker named Nico Kessinger. Although Nico had no idea Chris was still married, as far as she understood it, his marriage was already falling apart, or maybe even over already. But it wasn't. Chris was still living at home, still going through the motion with his wife and daughters. While deep down in his mind, he wanted out of this marriage. He wanted a different future with someone else. On August 12, 2018, Shanann flew home from a business trip in Arizona. Her friend and co-worker, Nicole Atkinson, picked her up from the airport around 2 in the morning and drove her home. The two of them had traveled together, talked the whole way, so her friend dropped her off at the house in Frederick before heading home herself. That was the last time anyone outside the house ever saw Shanann alive. What happened next? We actually know in disturbing details, because months later, Chris told investigators exactly what occurred, in pieces, across several different interviews, each one adding more truth than the last one. Early that morning, Chris woke Shanann up. He wanted to talk about their marriage, about the future, and in that conversation, he told her about the affair. He told her their marriage wasn't going to make it. And according to what Chris later admitted, Shannon's response was that he wasn't going to see his children again, not after this. And in that moment, Chris strangled her. Their 4-year-old daughter, Bella, walked into the room right around then. She saw her mother and she asked what was wrong with mommy. Chris told her that mommy wasn't feeling well. Bella stood there watching as her father wrapped her mother's body in a bedsheet and started dragging it downstairs. So he carried Shannon's body to his truck. He put both girls in the back seat and he started driving towards an oil work site nearly 40 miles east their home, a site connected to the company he worked for, a place he knew well. Because it was part of his regular route, his wife's body was on the floor of that truck the entire drive. His daughters were in the back seat, both of them still alive. When they arrived, Chris pushed Shannon's body out of the truck, and according to his own confession, the girl asked again what was it doing to their mommy. Then he went back to the truck. He used a blanket that belongs to Celeste, his 3-year-old, and then he smoothed her with it. In the back seat, while Bella sat right beside her sister, after Celeste stopped moving, he carried her body to one of the crude oil tanks in the property and placed her inside it. Then he went back to the truck for Bella. He used the same blanket. Bella fell back, and according to what Chris told investigators, her last words to him were, "Daddy, no." He put her body inside a separate oil tank and then he buried Shannan's body in a shallow grave near the tank, on the same property where he had worked for years, surrounded by equipment and machinery that had nothing to do with any of this. 3 people, a pregnant woman and her 2 little girls, gone in the space of one early morning, as the hand of the one person in that house who was supposed to keep all of them safe. Later that same day, Shannan's friends started texting her, just normal check-in message. Basically, they chat constantly, but there was no response. And then she tried calling, still nothing. Like I said from the beginning, Shanann was a very social person, so it's unlike her to go that quiet, especially not for this long. Her friend grew worried enough that she drove over to the house herself. She knocked, nobody answered. Though she could see Shannan's car parked in the garage, and through a window, she could see Shannan's favorite shoes still sitting by the door. So she called the police and asked them to do a welfare check. When officers arrived at the house, Chris was there. He told them he had no idea where his wife or his daughter had gone. He said the last time he had seen Shanann was around 5:15 that morning, right before he left for work. He described having an emotional conversation with her before he left, which, in hindsight, given what we know now, is almost unbearable to hear him say so calmly. And unfortunately, a neighbor had home surveillance footage from that morning, and they offered it to the police. They sat down and reviewed it together. With Chris present in the room, the footage showed only one person leaving the house that morning. It was Chris, loading something onto the back of his truck. So the day after the welfare check, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation issued an official alert for Shannann and the girls. And that same day, Chris stood in his own driveway and gave an interview to a local Denver news station, pleading for his wife to come home. He looked directly into the camera and asked whoever might have them to please bring them back, saying the house wasn't complete without anyone there. If you go back and watch that interview now, knowing everything we know today, it is genuinely hard to process. There is a moment in the background where you can actually hear Sarge Dog walking the property while he's speaking. He stood there in front of camera, asking the world to help him find the family he had already killed and buried less than 2 days earlier. It is without questioning one of the most chilling pieces of video footage connected to any true crime case in recent memory. So by August 15, just 2 days after Shanann disappeared, investigators had already pulled Chris' phone record and discovered the affair with Nicole Kersinger. They sat him down for a polygraph examination. He failed it, one of the worst calls the examiner had ever recorded. Chris asked to speak with his father, Ronnie, before he said anything to the police. And in that conversation, he finally admitted that he had killed Shanann. But the story he gave wasn't the truth, not yet. He told his father, the investigator, the version where Shanann had found out about the affair, flown into rage, and smothered their own daughters in revenge. He claimed they walked in and found his girls dead already, found Shanann in the act of killing Celeste, and he strangled his wife in the moment of pure rage and grief. It was a desperate lie. He was trying to make his murdered wife look like the killer of her own children. Investigators didn't believe a word of it. The timeline didn't add up. The surveillance footage didn't support it. And it didn't take long before that version of the lies completely collapsed under questioning. So based on what Chris had told them, investigators searched the Anadarko petroleum well site near a small town called Rogan, Colorado, the same site connected to his job. On August 15 and October the 16th, they found all 3 of them. Shannan's body was recovered from a shallow grave near one of the oil tanks. Bella and Celeste were found inside 2 separate crude oil tanks on the same property. Chris was arrested and formally charged. The story that had played out publicly for 3 days, the worried husband, the tearful plea, the search dog combing the yard, collapsed completely into what it actually was: a man who had murdered his entire family and then stood in front of camera pretending to search for them. Nicole Kersinger, the co-worker Chris had been seeing, cooperated fully with the investigator once she understood what had actually happened. She told them on the August 13, the same day Shanann was reported missing, Chris had asked to video call her. She said the conversation made her deeply uncomfortable, partly because the sheets were missing from his bed, and partly because of how intensely focused on her he seemed in that moment. Like he was already trying to step into a new life, before anyone had even realized the old one was gone. She had no idea at any point in time that Chris was planning anything like this. She later said it publicly that she understood people weren't going to see her in a good light because of her connection to this case. And she was right, of course, but nothing in that investigation ever suggested she knew what he was capable of or what he had actually done. Chris pleaded guilty in November 2018 to multiple counts of first-degree murder as part of an agreement that took the death penalty off the table. He was sentenced to 5 life terms without the possibility of parole, 3 of them running consecutively. For safety reasons, he was moved out of Colorado entirely and transferred to a maximum security prison in Wisconsin. But the full truth account of what actually happened in that morning didn't come out until February 2019, 3 months after his sentencing. During a 5 hours interview with investigators inside that prison, That is when Chris finally abandoned every previous version of the story, and then he described in detail exactly what I've just told you. The conversation about the affair, the strangling of Shanann himself, driving his daughters, still alive, to that oil site with her mother's body on the truck, smothering Celeste first, then Bella, using the same blanket both finds. Years later, a letter to a pen pal came to light through a television investigation. Chris admitted something even harder to sit with. He said that he had planned the murder for weeks beforehand, and that the small amount of painkillers they found in Shannon's system hadn't got there by accident. He had been giving them to her, hoping it might end her pregnancy, believing that would somehow make it easier to live for the life he wanted with Nicole. He also admitted in those same letters that he had actually tried to smother his daughters once before while they slept in their own bed at home, and then he failed. Shannon's family, particularly her parents, never stopped speaking out after the sentencing. In a separate civil case, a judge ordered Chris to pay them $6 million, $3 million for each of his daughters' deaths, plus damages for emotional suffering. And amongst that, legally speaking, he will obviously never actually be able to pay them. From behind those prison walls, the judgment exists mostly as a statement. Investigators and criminal profilers who studied this case afterwards placed it with a disturbing, well-documented pattern called family annihilation. Cases where a parent, almost always the father, kills his entire family rather than face the end of his marriage or the loss of the life he had built. Experts who study this pattern have pointed out that they often happen in August, right before a new school year begins, since that timing can delay anyone outside the family noticing something is wrong. They also noted that, unlike Chris, most men who committed this kind of crime takes their own life immediately afterwards. Chris later admitted that he considered it, but he didn't go through with it. What makes this case so hard to shake isn't really the violence of it. As horrific as that is, it is everything that happened in between. It is a man started in his own driveway, asking the world to help him find the family had already buried. It is Sarge dog walking the backyard while he calmly answered a reporter question a few feet away. It is a 4-year-old girl watching her father wrap her mother's body in the sheets and somehow still trust him enough to ask what is wrong with mommy. Shanann Watts spent her last hour of her life excited about the baby boy she had already named. Bella and Celeste spent years in the backseat of their father's truck, asking questions that nobody answered honestly. And the man who was supposed to protect all three of them had already decided long before that morning ever started that none of them were going to see another day. Now, I want you to answer that question I asked in the beginning. And personally, I have a question for you, wherever you are watching me from. Do you think that judgment was enough for that kind of unsettling crime? Let me know in the comment section. I'll be there to read your thoughts. Thank you.